How about one more, just to be fair?
A man came to the prophet and said, "Show me the seal which is between your shoulders, and if you lie under any enchantment,"
a demonic curse or spell,
"I will cure you, for I am the best enchanter,"
a witch practicing black magic,
of the Arabs. "Do you wish me to show you a sign?" asked the prophet. "Yes. Summon that cluster." So the prophet looked at a cluster of dates hanging from a palm tree, and summoned it, and began to snap his fingers until it stood before him. Then the man said, "Tell it to go back." And it went back. The enchanter said, "I have never seen a greater magician than I have seen today."
Takes one to know one. Moving from the ridiculous to the sublime, the religion based upon pagan practices has a chapter called
"The Messenger is Protected by Allah from Participating in Pagan Practices."
The first hadith is from Ali, the Prophet's adopted son, and his son-in-law, the patriarch of the Shiites, and one of many assassinated caliphs. He said,
"I have heard the Messenger saying, I was only tempted to take part in heathen practices on 2 occasions, and both times Allah prevented me from doing what I wanted. After that I was never tempted to evil right up to the time when Allah honored me by making me His messenger."
Since each of Islam's pillars were conceived by a pagan, I believe we have caught the Prophet in another lie. The temptation behind us, we move on to one of today's more common sins, sex in the workplace. Muhammad married his boss.
Ishaq. Khadija was a wealthy and respected merchant. She was determined and intelligent, possessing many properties. She was the best-born woman of the Quraysh, and she was the richest, too. Tabari. She used to employ men to engage in trade with her property and gave them a share of the profit, for the Quraysh were merchants. When she heard of Muhammad's truthfulness and nobility of character, she sent for him and proposed that he should go to Syria and engage in trade with her property. She would give him more than she gave other men who traded for her.
The sentence rambles on to say that Islam's matriarch sent one of her slaves to keep tabs on the neophyte merchant.
When they reached Syria, he halted in the shade of a tree near a monk's cell. The monk went up to Maysara,
that would be Khadijah's slave,
and said, "Who is this man who has halted beneath the tree?" Maysara replied, "He is a man of Quraysh, one of the people of the Haram sacred precinct." "No one has ever halted beneath this tree but a prophet," said the monk.
A 6th century monk could never have seen a prophet. Further, there is no evidence that a Christian or Jewish prophet ever set foot in Syria. The next line puts us in the precarious position of wondering who is lying. If the following tradition is true, the Koran assertion that there were no miracles associated with Muhammad is false.
They assert that Maysara saw 2 angels shading him from the sun as he rode his camel. When he arrived in Mecca, he brought Khadija her property, which she sold for twice the price. She sent for the messenger and said to him, "Cousin, your kinship to me, your standing among your people, make you a desirable match." She offered herself to him in marriage.
In one of history's great ironies, the most independent, successful, and liberated woman of her day played a pivotal role in assuring that 1 billion women after her would be deprived of these things. Muhammad married money, a woman old enough to be his mother. What's more, the would-be prophet married his boss. While this is questionable, it's not illegal, nor is what happened next.
Tabari. Khadija sent a message to Muhammad inviting him to take her. She called her father to her house, plied him with wine until he was drunk, slaughtered a cow, anointed him with perfume, and clothed him in a striped robe. Then she sent for Muhammad and his uncles. When they came in, her father married him to her. When he recovered from his intoxication, he said, "What is this meat, this perfume, and this garment?" She replied, "You have married me to Muhammad bin Abdallah." "I have not done so," he said. "Would I do this when the greatest men of Mecca have asked for you, and I have not agreed?"
While achieving a prophetic marriage through alcoholic inebriation isn't religious, it's the last line that should give us pause. Muslims have contrived scores of pre-Islamic hadiths to elevate Muhammad's standing among his people. Yet according to Khadija's father, he was a nobody. Further, he was hardly a prize specimen either.
Tabari. The messenger was neither tall nor short. He had a large head and beard with big black eyes. His palms and feet were calloused. He had large joints. His face was white with a reddish tinge. His chest hair was long, and when he walked he bent forward as if he were descending a slope.
The next 10 years passed without a single word from Tabari. While Muslims claim to know what the monks said in Syria, they haven't a clue what happened in Mecca. Ishaq has but one line.
Khadija was the mother of all of the apostles' children except Ibrahim,
who was born to one of Muhammad's sex slaves,
namely Al-Qasim, Al-Tayyib, and Al-Tahir. They all died in paganism.
The implication here is the Prophet's boys are all roasting in hell. The story of the greatest Khan ever sold resumes with this.
Tabari. We have mentioned the conflicting reports about the Prophet's marriage to Khadija. 10 years later, the Quraysh demolished the Kaaba and then rebuilt it. According to Ibn Ishaq, this was the messenger's 35th year. The reason for demolition of the Kaaba was that it consisted of loose stones rising to somewhat above a man's height, and they wished to make it higher and put a roof over it, since some men had stolen treasures kept in its interior.
All along I have told you that the Kaaba was little more than a pile of rocks. This hadith confirms the ignobility of Allah's house. And this is important. There is no chance that a roofless, 6-foot-high collection of loose rocks could have survived the rigors of 2 millennia of flash floods and searing sandstorms. Not only is there no written or oral legacy connecting Muhammad, Mecca, and the Kaaba with Abraham, there is no physical evidence either. The center of the Islamic faith, Allah's house, on which the whole Islamic world bows and turns, was a rock pile for rock gods. Tabari, who reported hadith claiming Allah had raised the Kaaba above the floodwaters, now says,
The Kaaba had been destroyed when the people of Noah were drowned, and Allah commanded Abraham and Ishmael to rebuild it on its original foundations. This they did, as stated in the Koran, 2 verse 127. When Abraham and Ishmael were raising the foundations of the house,
they said,
Lord, accept
this
from us.
Not only is the Quranic dialogue gibberish, as usual, and the circumstances preposterous, it's idiotic following the assertion that Allah's house was a pile of loose stones. Muslims had no concept of time. The 2,600-year chasm and 1,000-mile divide that separate Abraham from Muhammad's Kaaba cannot be crossed.
Tabari. The Kaaba had not had any custodians since its destruction in the time of Noah. Then Allah commanded Abraham to settle his son by the Kaaba, wishing thereby to show a mark of esteem to one he later ennobled by means of his prophet Muhammad.
Now we are being told that Allah esteemed the 20th century BC Ishmael by way of the 7th century A.D. Muhammad.
Abraham and his son Ishmael were custodians of the Kaaba after the time of Noah. At the time, Mecca was uninhabited.
Since even the Islamic hadiths aren't bold enough to move Abraham from Canaan to Mecca, how was he the custodian? And if the place was uninhabited from 2000 BC to 500 AD, why pile rocks in Mecca? It can't be the center of worship if no one was there to worship. So what's the point?